Good morning, gentlemen. Happy Tuesday. You are listening to the Gird Up Podcast, and I am Charlie Ungemak. I am the founder and curator of this awesome thing, and I'm glad you're listening to us today. If you're a new guy, welcome. If you're one of the old guys who's been with us for the whole time, I thank you again for your love and support as we continue to grow as the men that God created us to be. Now, if you have a Facebook account or Instagram account, make sure you're following us, being active on those social media websites. Also, we have a Gird Up community on Facebook that you should join, be a part of. We're going to keep updating it, asking questions, sharing things, giving you guys an opportunity to interact with each other. The more men we have in there, the higher quality the conversation can be. And then, gentlemen, if the Lord lays it on your heart to help support this podcast, which is free to you and free to men all over the world, but it does cost money to put together. So if the Lord lays it on your heart to donate to support our podcast monetarily, you can do that via Patreon. The information for our Patreon account is at the end of the episode. You can also choose to sponsor episodes. So right now you've been hearing our friends of the podcast, Him and Her Worship, and the one you'll hear today is Pastor Steinberg and his Christ for Disciplers podcast, which truthfully, I listen to it every single morning on my way to school. I love it. I enjoy it. I can't thank him enough for putting it together. I actually texted him the other day just to say, hey, I appreciate the work you're doing. Keep it up. I love it. The last thing before we get started, I just want to apologize to you guys because I have been slipping a little bit in the last couple of weeks here, getting everything up on time and making sure we're ready to go. I know that it's I know it's a little thing that a lot of you guys don't notice, but it's something that weighs on my heart. So I'm going to work hard on getting everything out to you on time and making sure that we're always updating social media and letting you guys know what's going on this side of things as well. Gentlemen, I hope that you have an awesome week. I hope that this interview with Mr. Ed Carow is a blessing to you, and I pray that the Lord continues to work in your hearts and your minds, draw you closer to Him, draw you closer to your Heavenly Father, and draw us closer together as men of God working in the kingdom, trying to be the men that God created us to be. God bless you all. Here we go.
Today's podcast is sponsored by the Christ for Disciplers podcast. I'm Pastor Paul Steinberg, son of Ken and father of 5 sons. Each weekday on the Christ for Disciplers podcast, I apply God's Word to raising the next generation. Take 10 minutes each weekday to listen to the Christ for Disciplers podcast and get direction and gospel power to disciple the youngest generation. Subscribe to the Christ for Disciplers podcast by going to ChristForDisciplers.com or searching on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and whatever else. ChristForDisciplers.com.
You are listening to the Gird Up Podcast. To gird up is an ancient way of preparing oneself for hard work or a battle ahead. Our work is to reclaim masculinity in the modern world and to live out our calling as men of God. Here you will find a community of believers working hard to become the men that God created us to be. Now it's time to roll up your sleeves and let's get to work. And here we go. All right. Our guest today is Mr. Ed Carow. Let's say hi.
Charlie, it is great to be here. I'm actually really excited to have a conversation today. I love what you're doing. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you. I agree. I think it's going to be a lot of fun too. And that's why that's the secret in an adventure like this is you got to make sure it's something you really enjoy doing. So I like having conversations with men like you just as much as you guys enjoy being on it. So it's good. I'm excited.
That's
so
awesome.
Tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I am a real estate developer and builder by trade. Been blessed to be in the real estate business for a lot of years. I have a couple of partners that I work with, and we build hotels and own them, and have really enjoyed a lot of real estate in the Milwaukee area, and have opportunities out of the state as well and throughout the country.
Anything that we would recognize?
Downtown Milwaukee, there's a few hotels, the Milwaukee Marriott downtown on Wisconsin Avenue and Milwaukee Street. It's a 205-room Marriott. The Westin Hotel, which is connected to the U.S. Bank Tower. So when you get off Van Buren right downtown on the lakefront, that Westin is a 220-room hotel that we have. The Aloft Hotel, which is 160 rooms right across from the Fiserv Forum, which is
just as you come over the bridge.
Really a pretty cool place to be right now.
My parents love that one.
Oh,
They've been there
nice to hear that.
Yeah.
Nice, that's great. And then we have the Spring Hill Suites, which is 155 rooms directly across the street from the convention center on 4th and Wells.
Oh, yeah, that convention center is huge. You like drive under it and everything.
Absolutely,
I don't know if I've ever been in there, but
yeah.
So you guys get a lot of traffic coming in and out of conventions.
We are really busy. Yeah, we get that kind of business, and we're really business hotels. So the folks coming in town for contract business or work during the week, that's our bread and butter.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how do you get into something like that? How does that start?
It's a long journey. You shouldn't ask that question because I'm an old guy. I could keep you going for
That's
hours.
Right, you got twice as much story to tell.
Oh my goodness! Yeah. I started actually in real estate management, and I was a part-time leasing agent when I was going to school. Making no money, but just trying to find a little bit to pay some bills. And I really enjoyed the real estate world, and took a few classes in real estate and was leasing apartments, and then got an opportunity to manage an apartment project and grew, and it was
like building the apartment building, or
no, these were managing existing apartment projects.
Okay.
And so I got the opportunity to become an on-site manager first with an 81 unit apartment project, and then it grew, and I had opportunity for growth and was able to manage multiple facilities, and the career kept going, and eventually over about 20 years I ended up president of that company. But it was through that process that I learned about real estate, became involved in lots of different trade organizations like building owners and managers and Institute of Real Estate Management. And I became friends with some great guys that to this day are part of my circle of influence. And a couple of them and I got together and we did some small developments, started build an 8-family or build a single family subdivision. And it kept going, and I found that I loved that creativity, the idea of taking a piece of land or an idea and building. And it really kind of shifted my focus, if you will, to where I wanted to get full-time into development. And over the years, through just doing some deals and having some experience, I ran into one of the guys that's now a partner with me and had grown up in the hotel world, and said, would you ever consider hospitality? And I just love learning. And so I said, absolutely. So we partnered up, and one thing led to another, and here we are today.
So what was your first hotel?
First hotel was Country Springs out in Waukesha.
Oh, okay.
We built the water park onto that, the Springs Water Park, and did a significant renovations of the property. And that really was a springboard, and then allowed us to become national in terms of development and do some third-party work for other venture capital and private equity groups. And eventually with that kind of experience, we were able to move to the point where we could build on our own account.
So what was there before you guys built the water park?
There was... The hotel was there, roughly 180 some rooms, but there was essentially a parking lot and a lot of additional land. So we built the water park and added it to the existing hotel, renovated the hotel, and kind of took it to that next level at the time.
Yeah, and that's kind of a cool project to start with, because like the history involved in it too is
absolutely
cool, so.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. Frankly, there's been a lot of our friends from Wisconsin Lutheran and the high school, the college, and lots of groups that have had events there over the years. We sold that a number of years back now, but it was a great experience for sure.
It just sold again recently, didn't it? I'm pretty sure it did.
They just went through a major upgrade, and it's a beautiful renovations that they've done there. But
awesome.
it's under new ownership.
Cool. So what's the biggest difference between hospitality and like managing properties?
I think there's a certain fun that is part of the hospitality, both in that you're dealing with guests of all different types that are coming in for a day or 2 days, and such a variety of people. And frankly, when you're in the development process, every day is different. We're dealing with some complex real estate challenges when you build something, and then to move into the operation side of it, you're constantly challenged. Where frankly the multifamily world, the apartment world, great, and there's it's wonderful as well, but I found it more day to day the same. And I'm a kind of guy, I have to be learning. I want to do new things. I want to kind of reach that next level.
Yeah, it makes sense. So like when you sign a yearly lease or whatever, because I suppose it would be kind of monotonous. And
it's kind of like we look at hotels. It's a 1 day lease.
Yeah, well, you just got turnover constantly.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you had like a dream project that you could do anything, what would you do?
I don't know that there's a particular project. We've really enjoyed working with the premium brands and building really quality, high-end development, and that's been our focus. But I think, frankly, it's just finding that balance within any given marketplace, and it's probably taking a fairly complex deal and getting it across the finish line. So we've had a number of those kind of experiences, and I think I take more joy in being able to look back at that very difficult road to get a deal done, and being able to find joy in that process.
All right. So you were talking about how you started out just as, like, I think in your email you said like $14 an hour or something.
Well,
like
let me again. I'm a lot older than you, Charlie. I started out at $4 an hour as a part-time leasing agent. And I look back, and I think when I got married at a very, very young age, I was making about $1,000 a month. Not the smartest thing in the world. But my lovely wife, Tammy, put up with me, and we've made it for almost 40 years and counting. So that's I'm awesome. Really, really happy. And
so this is a huge question, and I probably should narrow it down. But how do you get from there to here? How does that happen?
Oh, it's a gigantic process. It's a puzzle that happens, and honestly, it's God's hand at work. I'm, as I've shared already, a kind of person that I'm fairly driven and wanting to learn and grow and do new things. But like everybody, I have had giant peaks and giant valleys throughout that process. And you take all those collective experiences that you've had and try to build on them. And when you get knocked down, you get up and do the next thing. And by reaching and constantly trying to refine, you hopefully get to that next level you're shooting for. But again, the overriding thing is that we've got a Holy Spirit that's showering, in my case, some great blessings. I've also had the challenges, and I know that God is always in control, and that's kind of the fundamental that has driven me.
Right. Well, and there's even, like, frankly, for me to live as Christ, to die as gain, right? Like, what can man do to me? And so when you live from that perspective, where you're kind of saying, like, hey, the worst day here is really not that big of a deal, right? Like,
absolutely,
the worst day on earth is death, right? But that's release into heaven. So when you live with that perspective, I think it makes a lot of things a little bit easier.
And when you look at the fact that we have a God that loves us and is in control, no matter what he does, whatever his plan is the right plan. And I have all these ideas because I'm kind of entrepreneurial, right? So I decide, here, I want to do this next and do this next, and I put my plan together and I pray on it. And there's an awful lot of times God has a different plan, and I learn. And there's many times in life you can look back and say, what was really probably in my mind a terrible moment or a very challenging time was probably among the bigger blessings in my life. And that's, if you look at life that way, and you realize, and thankfully we have that faith. If you look at what God does for us and the love that we have, it helps you get through those times. And I think that's a big part of being able to take that journey forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll hear people talk about conflicts of faith versus like ethics and being able to succeed in business. And you'll hear some people legitimately try and make the case that you got to sacrifice your ethics or your morals or whatever in order to get ahead. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely, and I can speak to it probably in a number of ways. Again, I could probably talk to you for hours about that alone, but I am a firm believer that you can live your faith and you can do things in a Christian manner and still find peace, joy, and success in the process. And I've had that in my life. I had an experience with the company that I grew in the management and was a part of that. There was a point where I had different sense of values and where my focus was one of doing the right things and doing things that were God pleasing, and there were some value systems that were just challenged. It actually moved me to the point of taking that jump into self-employment. That's probably one of those dark times that I share with you, even though I grew with the company and was certainly from a perspective of salary and perks and all that, doing very well. I wasn't comfortable with where it was going, and that caused me to step out and go into self-employment. Became very challenging for a couple of years, going to a point where you're on your own. You've got no secretary. You've got a small little office, and you're trying to figure it out. And it was, in hindsight, one of those blessings from the Lord, where it put me on that next trajectory, and it allowed me to move to levels in business and my personal life that I would have never achieved were it not for that. And it wasn't my doing. It wasn't my plan.
Right. Well, when you're sitting, did you have an office when you left?
When I had an office that I rented and moved into,
Okay.
but when I was there, I was, head of a company working for an owner,
Right.
and I had a secretary and a company car and health insurance and great salary and lots of perks and expense account and
you just
really
walked
could
away from all of
and I stepped away from that and wanted to take that opportunity to try to craft or carve my own way. So that was very scary, and it was a big step down for a couple of years, but ultimately, again, led to much greater things.
When you say and sitting in that rented office space, you ever imagine what was coming next?
And I sure did, and it wasn't great rental space either. I'll tell you, it was a major step down in quality of space, but it was a good thing.
All right. So, talking about ethics and business going forward. Like, what advice do you have to give? Like, what would you say is, like, if you're working that $4 an hour job, hopefully nobody is at this point, but working that $4 an hour job, looking ahead and saying, like, I just don't know if I can do this. What advice would you give?
Well, let me kind of address a couple of things. One, I always, as I worked, took the position, right or wrong, that I wanted to advance myself. And the simple logic I use is if I could look at my colleagues or my peers, I always wanted to work 10% harder than the hardest working person next to me or around me. And I truly use that kind of philosophy. And if I was willing to do that extra, just work harder, be there, it was really something that allowed me to be recognized and to be appreciated in some sense, and it gave me that opportunity. At the same time, I say that even when I was working for $4 an hour or taking those next step up, you still can do what's right. And if you look at the way we are shared in our faith and the way we see in the Bible, if you do what's right and you let God drive you, you can make good decisions. Now, I would tell you there are people that will sacrifice it all and go all out and perhaps find wild success without that. And this is probably not a a great term to use, but I've often said I'm not going to be the richest guy in the cemetery, and obviously the fallacy in that is I know we've got eternity with our Lord. Right. We've got the ultimate in front of us, and the death that we have here is going to be the life that we can only dream of. So I look at it only from the sense of saying that maybe I'm going to make some decisions that aren't going to make as much money or lead to quite as much success, but that doesn't matter. And as I age, again, I share with you, I'm decades older. I look now at life, and none of that material stuff is of any meaning. It's great. I mean, don't get me wrong. The blessings are wonderful, and I look at the opportunities that provides Christians to be able to both share the word, to do first fruits giving, to help in ministries, to be enjoying great things with your family, to help your kids. All that stuff is great. But at the end of the day, none of that matters. Everything we have is a gift. And some of us have different gifts, but we're all the same. And we're child of God. And that's what it's about.
Yeah. What good is it to gain the whole world but lose your soul?
Absolutely. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
I just going to say, I think for me, you gain greater appreciation of that as you age. And I look someday as I'm going to be sitting on a bed sick, really what's important. And if you can kind of keep that focus as you go about your business life, your whole life is going to be a lot more blessed and successful.
Yeah. Well, and while you were talking, one of the things that you said a couple different times, everyone's the same, right?
Right.
And I was thinking about a couple weeks ago, Seth Hurlick was on from Him and Her Worship, and he was talking about there's a scene in A Star Is Born, that Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga movie.
Oh, sure.
They're sitting in a bar, and they look around, and he says, like, look at all the people in here. It's a crowded bar. Look at everybody in here. Everyone in here has talent. Everybody in here is incredibly talented. The difference between the people in here who are, doing something with it and aren't is, their transparency, their ability to be real, their ability to actually like go out and do something with it, right?
Sure. If you have passion, if you are willing to get out and take that next step and try, but again, fundamentally, we are all the same. We are, fortunate to have the love of an amazing Savior that can drive us, and those of us that have that faith have an additional blessing. It creates a peace, but at the end of the day, we're all here. We're all humans. We're all the same. Whether somebody has a lot of money or a little money or a great job or no job, none of that matters.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you were also talking about, especially on your rise, right? You were talking about working 10% harder than the hardest working guy in a room, right?
Right.
What does that look like?
Well, for me in those days, it was staying longer hours. It was looking for the next project to take on that I could help my boss with. It is looking at opportunities to be able to recommend efficiencies in the company. It's like looking out for the owner's bottom line and not focusing on what that means to me today, thinking a little bit more long-term perhaps, and just really looking at as well the people around you and saying, it's not about working till 5 o'clock today and going home and coming in tomorrow and doing the same thing, but how can I make where I'm at better? How can I help improve? How can I create opportunity for my boss? And guess what? You're recognized. Ultimately, it allows you that opportunity. When they're looking to bring somebody to the next level and they're looking at 4 or 5 people, they're going to gravitate towards the one that helped them and was considerate of the company or was trying to do the right things.
Yeah, understanding what your place in the picture a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. So, I think it's C.S. Lewis says humility isn't not thinking of yourself. It's not thinking more highly of yourself than you ought. Like, just are you a visionary? Like, you a big visionary guy? Like, are you a detailed guy, or do you like love looking out and like big ideas guy? Or
it's
both?
A little bit of both, and I think I'm a planner. I'm a plotter. I'm a person that is not comfortable not learning. And so I think when I look at myself from the business perspective, I appreciate today, but I'm always thinking about tomorrow. And one of the things that I think I do, and a lot of people like me do, is ask a lot of questions, do a lot of study, and in turn develop a plan or a path. And you have to have detail in order to execute that.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain amount of that that's necessary just by virtue of that. But I've tended also to try to focus on bringing the right people around me. I know that I can find people that are 10 times smarter than me for almost any piece of that puzzle. And I think one of the signs of a lot of people that have relative success are an ability not to be worried about those people that work for them or that are around them from the perspective of them advancing. I would rather have the smartest, most intelligent people I can find around me. And frankly, if they pass me someday, God bless them. That's wonderful. But I think there's a tendency in business by a lot of people to not want that super. A's tend to hire B's, B's tend to hire C's. I look at it, I want to hire A pluses and have them be better than I am, and that helps lift all boats.
How so?
Because you have a collective pool of talent then that allows you to do whatever it is. In our case, it's real estate development or investment analysis or ownership or whatever. If you have the best architects and the best design team and the best finance people around you, you come up with creativity that's not driven by me, but by this team of people that are just a joy to work with. And so that then allows you perhaps to do a better job on the next development or the next deal or whatever it is that you're doing in your business.
Yeah. So these people that you're kind of bringing around yourself, right? What do you look for in them? Like, what are you looking for in order to kind of bring them in?
Team players, huge. There's, I think, too much in our business world of people that are willing to cut down the other person or that are all in it for themselves. And to me, everything's about team. Ego is a huge challenge in business, and frankly, to have any relative level of success, you've got to have a certain amount of ego, but it's trying to keep that in check. And again, I realize that with my faith, I know God can take everything tomorrow, and that doesn't make me any less of a person. It's again God's plan. So if you can avoid that ego and not get caught up in that, and find people that come on board that are going to do the right thing, that are going to espouse the values that you have in business, that are going to work hard in their respective areas and can frankly be a lot smarter than you, it all comes together.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of people in the world that think the world stops spinning if they stop, either they stop working or the world will stop spinning if they are no longer there.
Yeah,
right?
and we sure learn through life that the exact opposite is true.
Good. Yeah. All right. So you had, as you're coming up, you've got family, right?
Yes,
and
indeed.
You've got a wife for 40 years, so you must have done something right. She stuck around
telling
for 40
you,
years.
what an incredible woman. I am so blessed that way. Tammy and I got married at a very young age. I was 21 years old and an engaged guy. I would not recommend that, by the way. That's again, I had no money. I had no business being married at that age. I thank the Lord for my beautiful father-in-law and mother-in-law that put up with me and allowed that to happen, and some very supportive parents. But I have an incredible woman at my side that has made that journey with me, and we fortunately grew in our faith, and we grew in our family and our lives together, and we're blessed with 3 daughters. And I can tell you, the value of a parochial upbringing is just amazing. We looked for a church home where we could have our children go through elementary school, landed at Star Bethlehem in New Berlin locally. Our kids went through there. All three daughters then went to Wisconsin Lutheran High School. And we couldn't be more blessed to look back today and see that their best friends today are people that they grew up with in that Christian upbringing. And when we had kids over at our house on Friday or Saturday night and in our lower level enjoying themselves, more often than not we'd be hearing Christian music and good quality things. And it's just it's so heartwarming, and that carried forth in that again it's purely a blessing, and it doesn't it certainly isn't often that way or always that way. But I have 3 son-in-laws now that are all Christian men, that are strong Christian men. And we've been blessed with a granddaughter that's now 10 years old, and we have a new grandchild on the way through our youngest.
That's
so
exciting.
We're going to have a fun summer or fall of this year with a new baby coming in.
Yeah. So as you're climbing the ladder and as you're going, some people use the word balance. I'm not a huge fan of the word balance, but how do you prioritize as far as family and business and work, and what does that look like as a businessman?
That's a great question, and there's learnings in that too, because I would tell you that early in my career there was a time period of probably 6 or 8 years where I was traveling a lot. When I was with that management company, we had properties in 8 different states, and I had the responsibility of getting to all the different properties every 6 weeks. So I went through a stretch of a good number of years where I was on the road a lot of times, Monday through Friday, come back, you're disconnected with family, you're trying to catch up, you're exhausted, and it's really hard to step right back into home and be the guy, the Christian guy that you need to be, and be there for your kids. And I look back at that with a certain amount of regret. And as I was able to ultimately transition, I really tried to focus on the importance of being able to provide experiences and be there. And now I laugh about it or joke about it all the time that with my kids, that with our grandchild now, it's my second chance. Yeah. And we spend 3 or 4 days a week with my grandchild. We take care of a lot of things. We love that interaction. We help our kid's dog. We have the opportunity to do some caregiving for my mom and help out my father-in-law. And there's a balance in my life now that I wouldn't give up for anything, that honestly I didn't have in my early career, and I was blessed to be able to get that in my later career.
Is that something you did intentionally, or just kind of happened?
It's certainly there is an intentionality to that. I realized that where I was with the intense amount of travel was not healthy for my family, so I longed for that part of the world that I was in to change. And so knowing that, there was certainly intention to it. Also, the fact that the business that I went in with development was different in that it's more, as a self-employed person, a scenario where you have control of your time. You still perhaps work a lot of hours, but I had a lot more ability when I went on my own to be able to use time to my discretion, and I purposely would focus on that. And my wife and I are both the same in the mindset of trying to create really great opportunities for interaction and time with our kids. We travel with them. We spend a lot of time. And again, I think when we look back at our life, the things that we all talk about are the wonderful experiences we had together. It has nothing to do with what kind of house you have, or what kind of car you have, or what kind of toys you have. It's what did we do together as a family, and how do we share our faiths, and how do we get through the hard times. And I've had lots of those really hard times, like you and like everybody else in our world has had.
Yeah. All right. So 2 big questions I ask every guest. The first one is, if you could go back and talk to your 18-year-old self for 5 minutes, what would you tell him?
I would say a couple of things. First, I think that what comes to mind is let go and let God. And knowing that we have a loving God that's in charge. And I think when I was an 18-year-old, I was going to go and work hard and make it happen and focus on getting ahead. And that was, hugely important in my little world at that time. And I was in such a rush, and you lose sight. And I think I've, over the years matured as a Christian, and I can sit back now and look at young people and say, just, be still, let God, pray, get in the Word, just listen, and also take your time. Life is a journey. It's not tomorrow. So you've got 30 years in your work world ahead, or 40 years, or whatever that turns out being. So just accept the process in front of you and enjoy. Smell the roses along the way, because it goes fast. I sit here with you today at 59 years old, and I can't believe I feel like I'm 30, but life has gone by so quickly. And if I could remind myself at a young age to be able to just enjoy the journey and to be in the moment and be real with it, and also to think about the future at the same time. I think as a young person, I was not focused on what am I going to live on when I retire, and how am I going to save, and deferred gratification, right? I get a paycheck today and I spend it tomorrow. Yeah. And you tend in the world today, I think a lot of times to live beyond the means. There's so much peer pressure. I mean, and all these, credit card offers, and you see the cool cars and the people that, give you the appearance of success. Yeah, that's not real. And if I could look at myself then and say, just chill, Ed, and it doesn't matter. So defer that gratification, save, enjoy the process, let time happen, but it would make a big difference.
You want to know why I love podcasting? That's it right there. Because who else would have looked me in the eye and said that just now? That's awesome. That's exactly what I need to hear too.
Oh, that's great. All
right. So the other question we asked then is, what does it mean to be a man, or what makes a Christian man?
Well, I think that, again, that's a loaded question. There's probably so many answers to that. But there's a few things that resonate with me. And I look at doing the right thing. You spoke of the business and probably the challenges out there for people that are in front of them, where they may give up that faith or Christian belief and approach. And I think, again, just focus on doing what's right. That's a big part of being a Christian man, finding that balance. And I know that you don't like that word balance, and I don't either. That's perhaps not the right word, but
it just like paints a picture of like the idea that you have compartments, right?
Right. No, and it's not that, but it's appreciating as a Christian man the role that you have in being an example to the world, being an example to your kids, being part of living your faith. And I think the other thing that really resonates with me is, right now I look at getting in the Word, being in the Word, being in church, embracing your Christian family, surrounding yourself with people that are good people. I've heard it said that we can kind of look at who we are by this scenario. There, you're the average of the 5 people around you.
Yeah.
And if you surround yourself with the wrong people, you're going to go the wrong direction, right? And so as a Christian man, I think it's really being focused on who am I hanging around with, and who am I surrounding myself with, and am I embracing the things that we're taught in the Bible?
Good. You talked about getting into the Word. What is your I don't want to say, what does your spiritual life look like? What does your study life look like?
Yeah. I wake up every day, and the first thing that I do on my phone is pull up the Wells devotion and the Time of Grace devotion. Yeah. And now I think I may have mentioned to you in past, I'm a board member on Time of Grace, and I just love that ministry, and it is reaching so many people that there's over 3.4 impressions per month that are happening now through all those ministry endeavors, and I find that tremendously uplifting to start my day off with that. Yeah. My prayer life is hugely important to me, and I tell you, sometimes it seems endless, the amount of prayers that I offer up out there, but I know that our God invites us to come to Him, and I start that off with "Your will be done," and I try to absolutely focus on that I'm going to throw out all these things, Lord, that are on my list of asks, right? But Your will be done, and give me the strength to be able to accept whatever plan that You put before me. But where I'm at now, here's a whole bunch of prayers, and so that's a huge part of. I pray in the morning. I pray before I go to bed at night, and certainly at times throughout the day. But I make that a point. And there's some prayers that I used with my kids when they were little that I continue, and then being in the Word. I very active in church, and we travel a lot, but I try when I'm in town to attend Bible study on Sundays, and just stay close to the Word of God.
Yeah. Yeah, the first thing I do every morning, well, unless I'm really sleepy, then I'll jump in the shower first. First thing I do is stumble out here, drink a glass of water, and get in the book of Proverbs. That's every day, because there's 31 Proverbs, right? So
awesome.
One proverb for every day of the month.
Fantastic.
And then 8 months a year, you get to read about a godly woman, too. So, yeah, it's good stuff.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, so you also talked about, when we were talking before we hit record, you talking about you like listening to podcasts. So what are some of your best favorite ones to listen to?
Well, I'm kind of a generalist. I listen to a whole bunch of things, but one that particularly I've enjoyed is a guy, Tim Ferriss. And he is somebody, and this is really from a business perspective. It's, from a spiritual perspective, I look at that, and there's guys that perhaps are different kind of thinkers, but he interviews and does long form podcasts, generally a couple hours a week, but highly successful people, from the likes of Bill Gates to Elon Musk to you name it, and they try to, in the podcast, drill down into what are some of the core tenets of that person's success or journey, and try to isolate how do you get from A to B with the least amount of additional energy. So if you could figure out what are the 20% of things that a person does to get to that next step, it's kind of drilling that down, and I find that fascinating, and I enjoy that kind of information.
Right.
And again, I applaud you. I've listened to your work, and I appreciate what you're doing. Reaching out to young men as you are, and people is just fabulous, and I commend you for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And as we go here, hopefully get into more like. Excuse me. Trying to get into more like, what's the word? Not lecture. Lectures was coming to my brain. What do you call it when you get in front of people and you give a presentation? What do you call that? Seminars. There we go.
Oh, gotcha.
Hoping to get into some seminars, both for young men, teaching them, like what ought you be doing, what you should be looking for in the men around you, particularly. Well, so our 3 tenets are. I did this a couple of years ago actually for my classroom at St. Marcus, but. I wasn't really liking the way I was handling, in a way we were as a group handling some of the misbehaviors with kids and addressing them. It was kind of like a do what I say, like I'm the adult. It didn't go much deeper than that, and so I dug into the the different epistles, and both Peter and Paul write extensively about what. Like the leaders of the church should be like, and what they should look like, and what they should be doing. But there's both have very small sections about what young men ought to be taught. Mm-hmm. And when you boil it down, it really truly is: be humble, or clothe yourself in humility, be submissive to authority, and be self-controlled. And if you do those 3 things, the men in your life are going to take care of the rest. And so understanding just the massive responsibility of men and the role they play in boys' lives.
Yes.
I've heard the phrase "dad is destiny," and there's a lot of truth in that. But then also recognizing that as a young man, I have to find men worth emulating, and then
Sure.
I have to actually go follow them, and I have to be humble enough and self-controlled enough to see through on the mentorship that I'm getting from them. So both seminars on that side of things, and then for men and women, talking about what you can do for your son, because the roadmap for turning a boy into a man that the world gives us is crap. Right?
Absolutely. You're spot on.
there's one book. There's one good book on manhood, and it's the Bible, right?
Yes.
And so kind of taking that conversation and planting it back into Scripture and saying, this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to teach your son so that he can be the man of God he was made to be. So,
Absolutely. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So we'll
I
see.
applaud that. That's
We'll get there.
incredible.
We'll get there.
You will. You will.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we will. I'm excited about it. All right. So if are you on social media?
I am. I'm not too much of a follower. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I've got emails. So
right.
seek out my name, and you can certainly find that.
Right.
I don't get too active in the whole
right.
social media, but I'm out there because it's the thing to do, right?
Right.
You
Absolutely.
gotta figure out where your high school buddies are, and
That's right. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do it?
You could email me at ed@jacksonstreetholdings.com. You could look me up on LinkedIn. You could look me up on Facebook. It's Ed Carow, Carow. I'm pretty easy to find, and I'm local, so it wouldn't be too hard.
Awesome. Appreciate your time.
You bet.
Awesome.
This has been fun.
Thank you for listening to the Gird Up Podcast. If you like what you're hearing on our podcast, make sure you're sharing it with friends and family, men in your life who you think need to hear our message. You can find us on social media, on Facebook under the Gird Up Podcast, and there's a Gird Up community as well there where you can interact with other men on the journey toward Christian manhood. You can find us on Instagram as girdup_like_a_man. If you'd like to help us bring our message to more men just like you all around the world, you can hit up our Patreon account. Type in www.patreon.com/girdup. And finally, please leave a 5-star rating or review on whatever platform you use to listen to our podcast, whether it's iTunes or Spotify. What that does is it helps us get more attention in the podcast world and bring more men to our message. Thank you again for listening to our podcast. Thank you for all the ways you support us and help spread the word. Until next time, go gird up and be the man that God created you to be.